The evil lurking in the shadows of Floor 5's catacombs? No, that is not the reference moment from War of Underworld. We got returning characters, new characters, and yes, unlike the first teaser trailer, we actually do have Floor 5 scenes in this new trailer for the Floor 5 story, Scherzo of Deep Night. Welcome everyone, it's me Gamerturk, your best source of Sword Online information, and this is Sword Online Progressive Explained, featuring the anime expo trailer for the Scherzo of Deep Night movie. If you're new to my Explain series, what I do here is essentially provide you all the key information from the source material light novels, and this Progressive Explained is brought to you by my Amazon and Book Depository affiliate links for the Sword Online Progressive Volume 4, featuring Scherzo of Deep Night itself. Perfect chance to read it before the movie for the full enjoyment of the story. But with that, let's cast away the sly foxes spreading misinformation and get on with Progressive Explained. As is the case with trailer explained videos, I will be talking about content that is yet to be animated, so if you don't want any spoilers, you may want to leave now, as I take time to recommend you to watch another video of mine to answer the question of why are we jumping from Floor 1 to Floor 5 in this movie, as that's kind of a popular question since the announcement. And also, Aria explained videos will continue starting next 2 weeks with the release of the Blu-ray in Japan. But if you're still here, that means you're in it for the spoilers. We open up with basically the scene that people are likely the most excited about, with a hooded figure stating they are sowing the seeds for now. A lot of people are correct with the assumption that this is Laughing Coffin, well, a proto-form of it at least. However, as you may have figured out by the voice, this is not the scene that was hinted at in War of Underworld during Asuna's confrontation with Po. Floor 5 is indeed the first time Kirito and Po come across each other, but be ready for the poster to bless you with an appearance in a different scene instead. This scene in the catacombs of Floor 5 takes place between two proto-Laughing Coffin members, one of which is Morte, a regular of the PK band Shenanigans who almost managed to legitimately duel PK Kirito back on Floor 3, Concerto of Black and White. And as you can guess from the line, there is trouble brewing. This has been an ongoing theme since the events of the second floor, well, you can even say since the first floor, as Joey aka Johnny Black tried blaming the death of Diavel on all the beta testers, but Kirito took a step forward and focused the hate on himself so that the remaining players would not hold a grudge against the rest of the beta testers, who were a key source of information and experience to successfully clear the game. I would say the events of Floor 5 is their biggest attempt yet to cause a clash between the clearers, but gotta be honest, they had some pretty damn solid attempts so far, and this one is on par too. However, this scene is one of the most memorable ones, so I hope they adapt it to its fullest. They already had the groundwork for this scene covered with one of the movie original editions back in Aria Starless Night movie, so you'll certainly recognize a specific type of mob here. But the main focus of this scene is Asuna's ingenuity in the direst of circumstances after a streak of misfortune, definitely among the top scenes to look forward to in the movie. A little bit of context may be lost due to the Floor 2 story not having been adapted, but it's not like Asuna does not have a little flashback anyways to remind the reader in the books. In fact, this was something we discussed on our SAO Wikia podcast about Scherzo. If they adapt flashback scenes in the movie as they happen in the books, the jump from Floor 1 to Floor 5 literally will have absolutely zero effect. We get a glance at Asuna as well as Karluin itself, which is also the place where the key visual takes place. You'll recognize those stairs and the town built on the hill quite clearly, and while the words being spoken are not directly from Scherzo in the books, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe it's just the wording throwing me off here, but it is a very similar sentiment that comes across quite often throughout Progressive, tying into the attempts of the PK gang, of course. Should they successfully break up the clearers or tip off the tight balance both sides find each other in, Sword Online will find itself in a situation where nobody may be able to come together to continue spearheading the floor clearing, leading to the game becoming impossible to clear. And it is such a delicate balance. While the Floor 1 clear gave people a lot of hope and numerous floors were cleared within the span of mere days afterwards, the Aincrad Liberation Squad and Dragon Knights Brigade, the two main clearer guilds led by Kibao and Lind, constantly find each other butting heads. The moment the two are thrown into chaos, basically 80% of the frontline force gets thrown out of the picture. We get a rare bit of Argo screen time, which I imagine to be from the New Year's party we're supposed to have in this movie, which should go parallel to one of the hardest hitting scenes. I won't say much more, but look forward to the end of the movie, or potentially what'll be the post-credit scene. They didn't use a similar epilogue feeling scene, the floor 2 scene in Aria, as the post-credits plug, so I imagine this will be part of the normal runtime of the movie before the credits as well. In fact, it will be a beautiful moment to start scrolling into the credits if you ask me. The Kibao and Lin scene, it's a bit tricky. If you watch the previous explained video featuring the short teaser, this takes place back in the floor 4 boss room. How do I know? Because of the bars you can see right outside of the entrance door. Those bars are there to wash off the flood of the boss while keeping the players in the area. So the scene is probably Lind and Kibao returning to town after the defeat of Whiteedge the Hippocampus, aka the Water Horsey, while tasking Kirito and Asuna with unlocking the next floor door and the teleport gate as usual. Don't get the wrong idea from the original anime adaptation and the way certain things were portrayed there. Kirito and Asuna are quite the integral part of the boss raids, with a lot of trust put in them from the respective guild leaders, who are also pressured by the notion of collaborating with the Dirty Beaters, so they do need to put up a certain act themselves while trusting Kirito with a lot of key aspects. However, the sentence being spoken here and the following scene are not tied to that one we just talked about. Now, you can correct me if you spotted something else. With a great portrayal like Aria, I have grown to accept they are willing to turn passing mentions into proper scenes, but this mention from Kibao is not straight from the books. However, on the topic of floor 5, I cannot exactly see where this would fit in, but it has to be part of the guild flag talk, the core narrative of Scherzo, which yes, ties into the PK band trying to instigate trouble. Now, there is a scene in between Kibao's talk, and that is the first strike dual mode menu prompt. I always imagined this would take place in a little bit more of an open area, but not like my imagination makes any difference here. This is pretty much the first scene of Scherzo of Deep Night. Not necessarily the movie, depending on whether we begin with the floor 4 boss or not, but the Scherzo story itself from the light novels. Due to the PK gang increasing their activities, Kirito finally decided to teach Asuna how to do PvP duels, and he is the one initiating this duel if you look at the hand and the fingerless gloves, while selecting the first strike mode here, where the winner is decided by being the first one to drop their opponent into the yellow zone. Of course, as we have learned back on floor 3, the first strike mode is a cheeky gambit to be able to legally kill your opponent as well without turning orange, something Kirito learned the hard way against Morte, which is the main reason for this planned training taking place. It is a short but quite the intense scene, especially if we are continuing from an Asuna-centric point of view, at least for this specific scene. And of course, the one that follows, this is going to be a bit of an assumption from me, but given the calm and cold stare of Kirito imposingly reaching for his sword in the back, this is very likely to be the extension of the very first scene showcased in the trailer. Kirito and Morte about to have their second showdown, this time in a way that would lead to one of the two players going orange, and Asuna is desperately trying to find a way to not only prevent that from happening, but also trying to obtain a precious item that ended up in the hands of Morte and his companion by using her ingenuity. Once again, a highlight scene from Scherzo overall, look forward to it. Asuna's line over the text card ties back into the act of the two guild leaders who must put up an act to be in contact with Kirito, constantly playing tough towards him, which eventually wears her out psychologically. She is aware that Lind and Kibao are literally stuck between a rock and a hard place. Particularly Kibao makes this very clear when talking to Kirito. However, Asuna just reaches a breaking point at some point regarding their attitude, which is what you are hearing here. Next up, we have the first animated portrayal of Litten, the trusty tank who had quite the fortune of finding a glitch spot and farming it for materials before the Cardinal system patched it, which is the source of her fancy armor and the headpiece you do not exactly get to see here. And while it is the first portrayal of Litten in animated form, I won't say the same for the other side of this Shakespearean story, although it is gonna be the first time you will properly meet him. Shibata, who's the person in the back, was also portrayed in Aria of a Starless Night if you looked at some specific specific promotional material, and also the post-fight chaos in the Ilfang boss room. The two are basically the core supporting characters of the movie, joining the main trio of Kirito, Asuna, and Argo in Scherzo of Deep Night. Now, Mito saying goodbye Asuna. Of course, I cannot say anything about a movie original edition that is something as vague as a brooding farewell, but looking at the glossy and seemingly wet floor, my guess is that this is from the floor 4 boss room after defeating the water horsey. You can even see the pillar being reflected on the water there. Some people are assuming Mito is going the PK band route. No, just no, I don't buy it. Way too out of character in my opinion. It's more likely that Mito has become a solo player after a shock following the Ilfang boss fight, or joined one of the two guilds in safety, and she's probably just refusing Asuna's offer to tag along with them or something, you know? Probably something as basic as, yo Mito, come open the floor 5 door with us. Simple as that. I don't expect this to be a major plot beat, especially considering the tension between Mito and Asuna was the topic of Aria, and this would just be retreading that. We probably are not gonna get that. This is just the movie being competent enough and showing a reason why Mito won't be a major part of the Scherzo movie rather than anything else. We'll most certainly see her again for the floor 5 boss battle anyways. The Astral Monster. This can be an anime original edition, but it can also be one of the two scenes in the books. I cannot be 100% certain due to some minor details looking different. The first one is a quest called the 30-Year Lament. This is Asuna's first encounter with an astral type. However, since the ghost is the quest NPC, it is not supposed to be moving this aggressively or frantically. Considering Kirito and Asuna appear separated in this scene as well, and Kirito has a sword drawn, I imagine this is probably not it. Although the environment seems to be a chapel indeed, rather than the catacombs, so there is a potential that this scene was altered slightly to remove the overblown comedic tone from it, similar to some other scenes we had in Aria of a Starless Night, most notably the bath scene that decided to not feature Argo for good reason. Instead, we may be getting an actual jump scare for Asuna, and considering the movie aiming to go with the scarier mob design, it also fits the bill on that front as well. The second potential scene is prior to the PK player scene, where Asuna encounters a mournful wraith and is pushed into a trap that begins her chain of misfortune. Considering the scene should take place with a solo Asuna, the mere existence of Kirito in the back potentially invalidates this assumption to a certain extent. But technically speaking, since Kirito was already on the chase for Asuna at this point, they can just modify the scene slightly for Kirito to reach Asuna at the final moment before she is taken away by the trap. It's a potential I can see happening, especially because the movie is very likely going to portray this scene 100% from Asuna's point of view through and through, which is something I'm fully on board with. No shifting focus over to Kirito in the middle of an intense and hopeless sequence following Asuna would definitely be a good choice. On to the final scenes, Kirito reaching out to Asuna by slamming his sword into the wall. This is quite the amazing scene in my opinion, nice one there. We're definitely going to see some good scenes from the water horsey floor boss fight from floor 4, something Barcarollo of Froth literally skipped over. Yeah, the book just introduces the main mechanic of White Age the Hippocampus, the flooding of the room, and then just powers through it with the mention of some additional allies doing some big damage to dispatch the boss quite quickly. Now, well, the concern about those allies not being visible in any of the trailers is a separate topic. We are seeing a huge amount of floor boss content in these trailers. What's happening here in this shot is that Kirito is simply stabilizing himself in preparation for the flooding attack, while also reaching out to Asuna to secure her from the flood, which is probably what leads to the scene in the teaser trailer. Everyone is just washed away in the back of the room because of the incoming flood, while Kirito and Asuna rush forward from a nearby location instead, because they were just stable with the sword slammed into the pillar. And following that, Asuna just straight goes in with the usual linear shown in this trailer, and Kirito right behind her, finishing White Edge off, or something that we don't get to see in the trailer because it's the final hit, come on. And of course, the final scene, Kirito seemingly going in with a fancy and spinny attack that probably doesn't match the motion, but will end up being sonically, because yellow, one of the many colors it's been described to be even in the books, a showcase of sheer consistency, isn't it? Well, the scene appears to be in a decently structured area. Could be the catacombs, but more likely the labyrinth tower for floor 5. Nothing special about this scene aside from looking quite fancy, to be honest. And if you made it this far, comment "It's almost showtime" to let me know that you did. As mentioned, I will continue my Aria explained videos covering the movie block by block, and will follow it up with addressing key topics about Aria, like how the events of Argo took part in were not changed at all, we just did not get to see them. But if you have questions you want answers to from Aria of a Starless Night movie, use hashtag AskGamerturk in the comments and I will make videos specifically to answer your questions. But if you enjoyed this explained video, do leave a like, subscribe and hit the bell icon for future SAO explained content. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter for the fastest news possible. A huge thanks to all my patrons and channel members as always, and until next time, stay cool.